There are no adjectives that could possibly describe how morally and materially bent Scott Morrison's government is. From day one, Scott Morrison made it abundantly clear that his government was not going to be about policy, it wasn't going to be about making the lives of Australians better, it wasn't even going to be about governing. He was very clear. A government led by Scott Morrison was always going to be centred around marketing and vague moral posturing about family values. His objective as Prime Minister is to hold on to power for as long as possible, no matter how many opportunities to actually improve, or at the very least, not degrade Australia he squanders. Yet over the past few years, ScoMo's family values shtick is not only getting old, but it's become impossible to believe. His spiritual mentor, Brian Houston, is facing charges of concealing child sex offences, and before those charges were official, when they were public allegations, ScoMo was still trying to go on a taxpayer-funded holiday to the White House with Brian. Not only that, just before this was filmed, Hillsong apologised on behalf of Brian Houston for 2 unrelated conduct breaches. How much more proof do you need? I'm sorry, but if we had an even half independent press, every time Scott Morrison trotted out his wife and kids like a robber using a hostage as a human shield, the press would say, rabidly inquire, "You've got kids, yet you're friends with an alleged pedophile protector. Isn't that a bit hypocritical, Mr. Prime Minister?" I've got kids and a wife. I've got kids and a wife. You can't ask me questions. That'd be bullying. Whoopsie. Now, time to win the election. Yet over the past few weeks, the press have instead been completely preoccupied with trying to blame Labor for a senator's death by heart attack. Can you believe all these conspiracy theorists blaming Kitching's death on vaccines? It's clearly Albo's fault. Well, I'll give him this. That's one way of making hay out of someone's death. Guys, if there's one way to honour this Labor senator's spirit, it's to get ScoMo re-elected. It's what she would have wanted. The press are insane. They have to conjure this confected moral outrage, deliberately ignoring the blatant moral rot inhabiting the modern Liberal Party and the institutions they control. This video will truly expose how deteriorated, well-fed, unfit for governing these rats have become after a decade in power, and the reason why the following story is so perfect for exposing this truth is that this story is where 2 cultural pillars of the modern Liberal Party meet. 1, the hypocritical decadence of the elite that rule over you. 2, their weaponisation of the bureaucracy to enact vengeful taxpayer-funded punishment of anyone that blows the whistle to expose this same elite for who they truly are. Also, it's a sex scandal. So I fully expect to win a Walkley for this vid. Do you remember that Peter Van Onselen story about those male Liberal Party staffers that wanked over women's desks? Well, before serious journalist Van Onselen was offered the story, guess who was offered it? We were. Well, we kind of thought, if we do this story, no one will take it seriously because anything we say, the mainstream press don't touch with a 10-foot pole. I mean, you saw it with the Dutton video. Not one mainstream media outlet picked up on even the most easy-to-prove salacious allegations, and quite frankly, it was a larger story than a lot of the stories that win Walkleys. So yeah, along with it being ignored, we thought, if we break the desk wanker story, I'll cop a bunch of allegations that I'm being homophobic. And I reckon the Libs will go out of their way to find some criminal charges they can throw on us for breaking it. So, we let it pass and go to serious journalist Peter Van Onselen, and when he broke it, rightfully it had a substantial impact. It sent the press and political circles into a spin. Article after article was written about it. It got so big, Scott Morrison was forced to respond, stating that the allegations were disgusting and sickening. ScoMo then continued his marketing strategy by chest beating about how he'd be terminating the employment of the desk wanker and imploring anyone with any more information to come forward. I can guarantee you, most of the time, the impact that a story will have depends on who the journo breaking the story is and who they're friends with, except in rare cases. This story that we're about to break, about what happened after Scott Morrison finished chest beating about desk wanking, is one of those rare cases. Get out your notepads, journos, you're gonna want to write this one down. After all the feigned disgust from Scott Morrison, Warren Inch, the nat who employed the desk wanker, also signalled his disgust. Not at his employee who wanked on someone's desk, but at Tom the whistleblower, the man who leaked the allegations to the press. Warren Inch called for the AFP to investigate not what really looks like rampant sexual harassment from his staffer, but the whistleblower who allowed the Australian public to see what the elite do in their parliamentary building for the crime of revenge porn. This is despite the fact that no uncensored pornographic images went to air. And guess what? Surprisingly, the Liberals got their way. Firstly, the desk wanker attempted to chuck a order on Tom in what was a complete abuse of process, as the desk wanker was attempting to use laws designed to protect people from domestic violence perpetrators to ensure that Tom didn't report more, let's just say, indiscretions to the press. Jesus. The coalition enjoy weaponising domestic violence law to cover up their weird sexual indiscretions more than they enjoy their weird sexual indiscretions. With the order, Tom agreed to shut up about this particular desk wanker in order to just move on with his life. But then, only a few days later, as if they were acting on behalf of the desk wanker, the Australian Federal Police raided Tom's house in Canberra and Queensland, seizing material from laptops, phones, hard drives, USBs. This was ostensibly because the AFP were investigating allegations of revenge porn, just as the desk wanker's boss had requested. Yet if the AFP truly wanted to pin revenge porn charges on Tom, everything relevant to their investigation was in the public domain. The charges would purely stem from Peter Van Onselen's report on Channel 10. Which is accessible to everyone. This is exactly what Tom's lawyer thought, stating, if he committed an offence under that legislation, the case is already apparent. The evidence is already there. The police already had the evidence that he circulated those images, so why do they need to raid his house to secure them? The short answer is, they don't. Damn, that is one sharp lawyer. Must have a great clientele. Anyway, why did the AFP raid Tom's house? Well, the Channel 10 report also detailed the fact that Tom knows of more misconduct from other coalition staffers, but more interestingly, it detailed this.
Which brings us to Tom's most startling revelation. He says he knows of prostitutes being brought into the building for the pleasure of coalition MPs.
Having sex, procuring rent boys.
Prostitutes?
Yeah.
In Parliament House?
In Parliament House. Procured by staffers for MPs.
Staffers getting male prostitutes to come to Parliament for MPs?
Yes.
Whoa! It's almost as if the AFP were acting on behalf of the coalition, and knowing there's an election coming up, the AFP raided Tom's house to see what evidence Tom had to back up his claims in order to mitigate any political damage that may flow from them. But this is just context. This is context to explain what could be viewed as an even more cynical play the Liberal Party pulled earlier on in order to mitigate political damage. Shortly after Tom's allegations were aired, the Department of Finance commissioned law firm Spark Helmore to write a secret report investigating Tom's claims. Tom agreed to participate with Spark Helmore, making him sign a confidentiality clause, yet from the outset, Tom felt that there was something off about the independent investigation. Tom would offer photo evidence to back up his claims, yet Spark Helmore would claim they weren't accepting evidence. Then it appeared strategic leaks to friendly actors in the press began. First off, with News Corp talking head Samantha Maiden uncritically reporting that the Spark Helmore investigation found the rent boy claims Tom made to Channel 10 were unsubstantiated. This was because a search of parliamentary sign-in records found no evidence of sex workers signing into Parliament House. Samantha, these are the same rent boys that are alleged to have had sex in the prayer room. The investigation was sparked by pictures of men wanking onto women's desks in Parliament. Is Spark Helmore truly naive enough to really think security is so good, regulations are so well followed at Parliament House, that no one could possibly get in there without signing in? The Spark Helmore investigation concluded earlier this year with the Department of Finance issuing this statement about the investigation. On the 13th of April 2021, the Department of Finance issued a statement confirming that the Office of the Minister for Finance referred a number of workplace allegations to the department that were first aired on Channel 10 on the 22nd of March 2021. Finance engaged an independent investigator to examine the allegations. This investigation has now been finalised. For privacy reasons, Finance cannot comment further on this matter. Oh, how interesting. A very similar result to a lot of independent investigations commissioned by the Liberal Party. No transparency whatsoever when it comes to what the law firm investigated, the methodology of the investigation and the findings of the investigation. Just investigation happened, don't ask any more questions, political problem neutralised for ScoMo. Well, not today. Because today, I at least hope to provide the Australian public with a bit of transparency as to the exact allegations the Department of Finance were investigating. And to be clear, these are just allegations. I'm not an investigation commissioned by the Liberals, so I haven't already predetermined the guilt or innocence of the parties investigated, but I do think it's important that the Australian public know this investigation took place. The first alleged event investigated was sex in the prayer room between the whistleblower and the desk wanker. I don't think anyone has denied that this happened, so moving on very quickly to some much more scandalous allegations. And I don't want to put any of my hilarious comedy spin on this, so I'll just read the Spark Helmore issue list verbatim. Alleged event/issue, alleged procurement of male escort/sex worker and facilitating sexual intercourse and or interactions in Australian Parliament House. Persons involved: Mr. Wynne, Mr. Pine MP, Mr. Newberry MP, Mr. Farmer. Details: Mr. Pine MP had staffers assist in the procurement of male escorts or sex workers that were arranged to attend Australian Parliament House for the purpose of engaging in sexual intercourse and or interactions. This was initially coordinated and facilitated by Mr. Newberry MP while working for Mr. Pine MP, and then the coordination of arrangements was undertaken by Mr. Wynne from around 2015. This included messaging Mr. Farmer to arrange encounters and signing him into, as well as accompanying him, through Australian Parliament House. Mr. Farmer was known to Mr. Wynne and Mr. Pine MP as they would allegedly attend dinner parties together at Mr. Wynne's residence in Canberra from time to time. Now do you see why this story is public interest? It really appears that the AFP were deployed to do raids on Tom in order to see what evidence he had of a possible political bombshell. But this wouldn't be the first time the AFP have acted politically in the benefit of the coalition. Just a few weeks ago, you saw their non-response to our Dutton story. But remember when the AFP raided the AWU and it was strangely leaked to the media beforehand? Then, just as strangely, evidence of that leak disappeared, and the now Attorney General Michaelia Cash refused to be interviewed by the AFP about the leak. The AFP have really serious questions to answer about their politicisation, but using revenge porn as a false pretext to raid someone's house in order to neutralise a possible political scandal, a potential scandal that the Australian public deserve to know about, that's a shocking new low. If the former Defence Minister is guilty of what's alleged, that has possibly dire implications for Australia's national security. Just earlier this year, the ASIO boss was warning of foreign spies on dating apps. What about rent boy spies? The most dire implication coming from that being Michael Myers' 1999 masterpiece, Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, becomes an even more relevant biting political critique of politicians and espionage in the Anglosphere than it already is. If that's even possible. Oh, behave! Shall we wank over the desk now or shag in the prayer room later? I'm not going to pontificate on this because we don't know the findings of the investigation, but we now know that Chris Pine, the former Defence Minister, was investigated by the Department of Finance over allegations he brought male prostitutes into Parliament House. I'm going to skip a lot of the scope of the investigation because a lot of it concerns people out of the public eye that were alleged to have sex in Parliament, but there's no public interest aspect to naming them. What is interesting is this one. Alleged event/issue, sexual intercourse and or interactions in an Australian Parliament House bathroom between Mr. Wynne and Mr. Details: Mr. Wynne and Mr. engaged in message correspondence and shared explicit and intimate pictures, potentially online dating/social media profile. These were shared by Mr. Wynne to the informant. Mr. Wynne conveyed that he and Mr. met up in a bathroom in Australian Parliament House and engaged in sexual intercourse and or interactions. This allegation is particularly strange as a staffer to Dave Sharma. Dave Sharma, who said he was confident none of his staff were involved when the original allegations were aired. Moving on. Alleged event/issue, sexual intercourse and or interactions in Australian Parliament House between Mr. Wilson MP and another unidentified male. Details: the informant and Mr. Wynne were having lunch at Australian Parliament House and decided to attend the Australian Parliament House prayer room to engage in sexual intercourse and or interactions. When they arrived at the prayer room, they saw Mr. Wilson MP and another male individual exiting. The informant formed the view that they appeared to have been interrupted or otherwise had recently engaged in sexual intercourse and or interactions. Mr. Wynne acknowledged and briefly greeted Mr. Wilson MP and appeared to know the other person. All individuals subsequently exited the prayer room. Guys, come on. Allegedly in the prayer room. Look, all we know is that these allegations were investigated. The Liberal Party have not only refused to release the findings of the investigation, but they've even hidden that these allegations were investigated to begin with. The shadowy, almost predetermined nature of the Spark-Helmore investigation and the complete lack of transparency regarding its findings, along with the seemingly retributive Australian Federal Police raids against Tom the whistleblower, altogether reek of a political interference and cover-up right before an election. Australians deserve to know what their taxpayer dollars are funding investigations of and the findings of those investigations, because otherwise, how is anyone to judge if those investigations are truly independent? But most importantly, Australians deserve a political party that doesn't weaponise laws designed to protect victims of domestic violence in order to silence whistleblowers and those who expose their wrongdoings. Put the Liberals last. They've become too well fed after 10 years. We've released the entire scope of the Spark-Helmore investigation on friendlyjordies.com under my new page, The Facts. If you've ever wanted to share the stories that you see here with your mum but thought that my videos are too smutty for her and she'll freak out about the F word, well, maybe she'll like this F word, Friendly Jordies, The Facts, where we'll be giving you just the facts. This story probably wasn't the best choice to launch the page. They allegedly did what in the prayer room? Even when he's trying not to be rude, he's still rude. Check out this story plus other past stories and upcoming stories on Friendly Jordies The Facts, links in the description. And donate to Patreon as well so we can do more investigative stuff like this and launch new avenues and whatnot. You know, just give us money.
Please share and comment below. Comment.